I mean, it was a big surprise, wasn't it, in 1988 when the Russians pitched up at Farnborough with these two MiGs. I mean, it was the first time in the West, we'd seen any of their military airplanes up close too. I mean, I guess the odd military attaché and semi-professional spy wandering around Russia had seen a few things, but the ordinary bulk of the guys, in the aircraft industry in the West had not seen these things. Come Paris the following year, they not only brought a couple of MiGs, they the Russians, but of course Sukhoi turned up with SU-27. And I shall never forget watching his first display at Paris. I was standing on the British Aerospace Chalet with a whole raft of very senior people, some of them service officers, Royal Air Force officers, some of them designers and test pilots in British Aerospace. And Viktor Pugachev, who was their chief test pilot, he did a 360, just an ordinary 360-degree turn in this thing. And Peter Martin, who was a big friend of mine, and we'd been on a Hunter squadron together, he looked up from his watch and he said, "That only took 10 seconds." Now, a 360-degree turn done in 10 seconds means that you have an average turn rate of 36 degrees a second. We at that time were hoping that our next generation fighter airplane would be able to achieve 25. Here was an airplane, and turning when you have forward-facing armament is what it's all about. You've got to turn to bring your armament to bear on the enemy. And he said, that was 10 seconds. And at that point, the chap broke onto the downwind leg and we thought, well, it's all over, he's just going to land now. And then suddenly on the downwind leg, this airplane just went like this. And flew around a corner and landed. And we couldn't believe what we had seen. It may seem a little strange if I say that what you see at an air show has implications for what a military airplane can do in war. Because some people would see an air show as just a circus act. But if you're an insider and if you're in the business of developing and flight testing fighters, you can recognize limits on how those airplanes are maneuvered. And equally, you can recognize when the limits are not there. And we saw these aircraft being taken to the vertical, come to a stop, slide back down, light the reheat, and fly away. Not once, not twice, but time after time, routinely. Now, this particular maneuver is a very demanding one, not as you enter it, but as you recover from it for any jet fighter. It's demanding because once the airplane has gone up here and stopped and starts to slide back, the only way out of this maneuver is to lower the nose. And as the airplane comes down like this, the air is coming at it from 90 degrees underneath. It is, if you like, fully stalled. Now, normally we only allow the air to come at our airplanes up to about 20 degrees, 20, 25. Why? Why do we have this angle of attack limit of 20, 25? Well, it means it is because if you exceed that number, you're going to lose control of the aircraft, normally in roll, sometimes in yaw. Well, these guys were just doing this maneuver, seeing the 90 degrees angle of attack, falling down through dead steady, never any yaw off. They had got a symmetrical airflow on this airplane. How had they achieved it? Didn't know. What about the engines? As they were starting to slide back, they were lighting the reheat. You could physically see it. Now, our Western engines are normally very severely restricted or limited in how and when you can light the reheat. They didn't have any of these limits. So we were fascinated, and I thought this means that they can do manoeuvres, of course, in combat, which we wouldn't risk doing. Or, more importantly, even if they don't want to actually come to a stop, they are not all the time thinking in combat, I mustn't get my airspeed get below so much. I mustn't let the angle of attack get above so much, like you are in one of our traditional Western airplanes. So you've got half your mind thinking about the enemy when you fight a limited aircraft, an aircraft with hard limits on it. You've got half your mind thinking about what the enemy is doing, and half the mind thinking about what I must not do with my aeroplane from an aerodynamic point of view. That is not such a relaxed situation, of course, as sitting there thinking, well, I can do anything that is necessary in my attempt to follow this guy or to chase after him. So we were it blew our minds what they had achieved.
Anatoly Kavocha was to become the center of media attention in 1989, following his miraculous escape from a MiG-29 crash during a display routine at the Paris Air Show at Le Bourget.
Today, disaster smashed Soviet pride in their fighters. A Fulcrum performing a difficult maneuver at 500 feet developed engine failure. It lost power and slid into a vertical dive. The pilot ejected 2 seconds before impact. It seemed he could have no chance of survival. But medics who reached him almost immediately said pilot Anatoly Kavocha was conscious and able to speak. It was a miraculous escape, witnessed by other Soviet pilots. Kavocha is expected to leave hospital tomorrow, when flying demonstrations will resume at Le Bourget.
The International Committee decided that the damage to the right engine was caused by a bird, a medium-sized bird like a seagull. Most engines could not withstand this, and in my case the engine simply stopped. This is called the stalling breakdown of the engine, but at the time I was not worried about what it was called. All I knew was that the engine had lost power, and that it was impossible to continue flying with one engine. If I had been 100 meters higher, I could have saved the plane, but with considerable risk to the public. Even so, it was very risky to perform such flight tests above a crowd of 50,000 people. I lost some time when I tried to save the plane. I made several unsuccessful moves, which didn't allow me to leave the plane. But when I realized that all my attempts had come to nothing, I turned on the afterburner of the left and right engines with a small interval, in the hope that the right engine would return to normal. The left afterburner came on, but the right was still dead. In that situation, it was important to guess what would happen when the afterburner in the right engine would light up. The plane began to turn over, spinning on the right side. If the second engine had started to work, the trajectory of the plane would have changed, and the plane would have fallen in the direction of the crowd. It could have been dangerous, but fortunately, I didn't lose much time on this, about 2 seconds, I think. Then I realized that the plane was spinning towards the earth, and I catapulted from the plane.
some people, when they watch the Cobra manoeuvre, of course, they are not so much impressed by the sort of things that I am amazed by. The stability of the thing, the routineness of it, the fact that they are confident to do it at low level. They just don't understand how it does it. You know, they think, well, how could you do that with an airplane? Well, the answer is it's the easiest thing in the world to fly an aircraft along straight and level, suddenly pull the control column back, tilt up the elevator or tailplane at the back end, generate an enormous downforce aerodynamically on the back. The nose goes up, you know. Goes up when you're sitting in it and looking at it, goes up when you're sitting in the stands and watching it fly. In fact, the nose doesn't go up, the tail goes down, because that's where the force is applied. But I mean, we're nitpicking here. What is tricky is allowing the nose to go up more than about 30 degrees. Because that is the point at which an ordinary wing stalls. All the airflow, which was smooth and streamlined and going about its ordered business, breaks down into a series of vortices and in generally a mess. If you persist in that, and you could do with any airplane, you could persist with a Harrier, you could persist with the Tornado, an F-15, anything like that. If you persist, you will now generate asymmetric disturbances. Your aeroplane will no longer remain symmetric because the flow has broken down into a load of disorganized rubbish. And inevitably, that means that the nose will move to one side and the wing will roll down. This means that you finish up with more lift on one side than the other and the aircraft goes out of control. The trick with entering the Cobra is to have an airplane which, despite this very high angle of attack, remains totally symmetric left and right with its airflow pattern.
Very few aircraft in the world have the necessary characteristics to perform this maneuver. No plane can do this in the way that the Su-27 and the Su-35 can. Similar maneuvers can be done by the MiG-29 and the F-18, but speed and attack angles are much lower. Cobra is the name of the maneuver, but the proper definition of this phenomenon is the dynamic braking of the aircraft as it goes out into large, post-breakdown angles of attack. This maneuver imitates the pose that the Cobra makes before attacking. From its conception in 1969, the Su-27 flanker continues to enthrall audiences worldwide with its spectacular display routines. Cobras, tail slides, and unprecedented tight-turning maneuvers will always be associated with this Russian superfighter. Anatoly Kavocha, in displaying the aircraft, has proved beyond doubt that man and machine can be as one, in the name Su-27 Flanker.